everybody, welcome to the Court of Public Opinion. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. The brilliant Mr. Peter Clayton is behind the camera. We've got a new microphone that we're using over these, well, we started using it on Monday, and it's a smaller, and I think it's stereo. The other one was, anyway, it's a long story, but basically we're just trying to get the sound to be as good as it possibly can be, because a lot of people look at the Court of Public Opinion on Facebook, but it is available as a podcast on a lot of different platforms, and Pete and I both want the sound to be as good as possible. And Tony Denton sourced this one, and he says it's brilliant, so I hope it is. Happy birthday if you're having a birthday. Happy wedding anniversary, March the 1st. First day of autumn. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Colour television begins in Australia. And it was 1975, Pete.
Yeah.
You were right the other day. We were talking about colour television being introduced in Great Britain in 1932, I think it was. Took a while to get to Australia, but it was 75. The Lindbergh kidnapping. 20-month-old son of Charles and Anne Lindbergh. He was the famous aviator. Kidnapped from their home in New Jersey, the little boy was found dead 12 days later. 1932 was the year. They did get the culprit, alleged culprit. Well, he was the culprit because he stood trial and he was convicted. Let's see, 1873, E. Remington and Son in New York begins production of the first practical typewriter. Remington was the first practical typewriter. US President Barack Obama warns Russian President Vladimir Putin over his involvement in Ukraine. That was 2014. It's been going on fair time, I might tell you. And apropos that, and I did make mention of yesterday these predictions about all of this business between Russia and Ukraine being a catalyst and a stepping stone towards World War III. I'll read you the story. Alexa has predicted the date of World War III. And there's not that much time to go, I might tell you. A chilling viral video that shows the popular digital assistant predicting that the Third World War will break out after a Russian invasion of Germany may not be quite what it seems. Fears have been growing that an all-out war could break out between NATO and Russia over the West's support of Ukraine. But no one knows for certain when or if World War III will actually begin. No one, that is, except Amazon's A1 assistant, Alexa. A viral video that originated on TikTok shows the device responding to a question about the end of the world by saying World War III starts on, if you want to make a note of it, November the 23rd, 2023, at 6:05 p.m. when Russia launches an attack against Germany. While the chilling prediction could turn out to be correct, the original source of the video clip suggests that it could be a hoax. But not a very pleasant or cheerful one, I'm sure you'll agree. Anyway, happy birthday if you're having a birthday. There were some other things too that were interesting. Yellowstone becomes the world's first national park on this day in 1872. Pete's taken pictures there, haven't you?
Yes, beautiful.
Yeah. What's it to do with the television show called Yellowstone?
Oh, I just think they're in that area.
Maybe that area, perhaps? Yep. The British government nationalises and takes control of the Bank of England after 252 years. I'll bet they were miffed. That was in 1946. 1910, David Niven, British actor who played in James Bond, in fact, the first one, Casino Royale, before Sean Connery or anybody else. I liked him best in the Pink Panther movies. Yes, lots of interesting things. The Land camera, yeah. Edwin Land, American inventor of instant photography and co-founder of Polaroid Corporation, dies at 81. It was 1991. Harry Belafonte, the Jamaican-born calypso singer and activist, Banana Boat Song, actor, activist, singer. He was born on this day in 1927. And I'll give you one more. Media magnate Rupert Murdoch's marriage, his first marriage, to Patricia Booker. That was in 1956. I'm not sure how long they were married, but they had a lovely family. And, you know, the funny thing, divorces can obviously end very acrimoniously. But Pat, I remember this clearly, she would ring me every year when I was doing the morning program on 5DN, and she would remind me, because she lived or lives here in Adelaide, and of course Rupert Murdoch lived here in Adelaide as well. In fact, the News Corporation head office, world head office, was here in Adelaide. We seem to be very good at the moment at losing head offices and therefore what you might call corporate relevance. We've let things slip away, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway, why I mention it is that it was just a lovely sentimental thing for an ex-wife to do, to ring up and say, would you I wouldn't have forgotten, mind you, because I always remember his birthday, but she would remind me to say happy birthday to him. Oh, that's sweet. Really sweet. Don't know about this one. The lead story on Channel 2 News on Thursday night, the story was about, or carried by, or presented by, the special correspondent for The Voice. The special correspondent for The Voice. A diatribe of why this nonsense is a good idea. Not 1 ounce of substance, reason or explanation. Again, I just don't understand the ABC. It's supposed to report, not campaign. Anyway, the discussion was detailing the poverty and the terrible gap that exists between black and white Australia, as was indeed the argument on the Insiders on Sunday, this Sunday just gone by. Not one question or word as to where the huge amounts of money given to Aboriginal people for no other reason other than to fix these problems. More than enough money. More than enough money. Again, I say Aboriginal people do not need what is probably going to be a confusing, ambiguous and divisive voice to Parliament, the executive, the bureaucracy. Nobody is actually sure who this voice will be addressing, talking to. You can see what a mess this is going to be. They don't need a voice. The Aboriginal people of this country need a forensic accountant to find out where the money goes. I'm sorry to harp, but a friend of mine used to say, just follow the money. Just follow the money. It'll tell you a lot. Sam, thank you for your correspondence. Sam says, of your Australia Day argument, you have to realise that this is the first most people have ever heard of this Citizenship and Nationality Act of 1949. You're trying to counter hundreds of years of history and teaching, printing and painting, and of course, let's not forget the hating. No one talks about 1949 because no one is still alive to remember the importance of the date or the legislation. Probably true. Sam, you're probably right. That image of Captain Arthur Phillip with his officers and men in Sydney, not Harbour, Sydney Cove, is burnt into everyone's psyche. Our history Sam, I get it. I understand what you're saying. I get it. But can't we be a little schizophrenic maybe and say, well, that certainly is the historic image. But these people landing and hoisting a foreign flag in 1788, these days it is contentious. And we mustn't offend anybody. And to me, while 1788 is interesting, it's important, I mean from a family point of view, one of my ancestors, Lieutenant George Johnson, was actually there when they hoisted the flag and is depicted in many of the paintings. He's the one in the blue coat. That's important, okay. But really, it's the date that Australia became a sovereign nation, independent of Great Britain, that is important. Our Independence Day. If you're looking for a date to celebrate Australia Day, it would logically be the 26th of January because of that event in 1949. If you like, we could remember the day partly for 1788, but much more significantly because it's the day we became a united country, an independent nation, citizens of Australia for the first time with our own passport. Can't we remember the day for both reasons, maybe? Reject one if you like. Ignore it, indeed. Embrace it for the other reason, the other occurrences that occurred years later. Save a lot of trouble, wouldn't it? Just a little bit of schizophrenia. With regard to the views that, well, we're all entitled to views, things we believe in or care to argue about passionately. I saw this and I wrote it down because I wanted to repeat it. It's worth repeating. It says, you know, the very powerful and the very stupid have one thing in common. They don't alter their views to fit the facts. They alter the facts to fit their views. Isn't that clever? Jonathan says, I don't know whether you are a conspiracy theorist or a drama queen. Probably a bit of both. This is about my comment regarding the Murray-Darling, and the assertion by government that there wasn't enough ecological water in the Murray, a matter of weeks after the greatest flood since Noah. Jonathan's comment is that farmers won't be persuaded off the land or forced off the land or bought off the land. I hope you're right, because we've got to eat, haven't we? And some of these idiots, of course, would prefer us to be eating insects. You know that, don't you? There's a definite push on to get us to try insect eating. Anyway, I hope you're right. What occurs to me is Rhodesia. I mentioned to you before when we were talking about this last week that Australia produces some of the best food in the world. We indeed produce enough food to feed 75 million people, and we've only got 26 million people. But then you think of, in recent memory, Rhodesia, or as it's called these days, Zimbabwe. It was the breadbasket of Africa. Rich, fabulously rich. Along comes Robert Mugabe, a communist, takes over control, drives the people, the farmers, away, puts in a whole bunch of war heroes, he called them, people who didn't know anything about growing anything, and within 5 years the country was totally broke, starving, on its knees, and inflation was running at 10,000% a year. Don't tell me it can't happen. Bad leadership and bad policy will never produce a good outcome. Never. And I found this startling. 31 million people have been subjected here in Australia to scams over the last 12 months. 31 million people. Our population is 26 million. That means that people have been scammed more than once. And it seems we're on our own, quite frankly, but it is just important for us to be on our guard and treat absolutely, almost absolutely, every communication and phone call with a degree of suspicion. I don't know how else we can travel. If I've got time for one more. The Liberals have pointed out that Labor promised here in South Australia to fix ambulance ramping. But quoting this from the Libs, I want to get it word perfect. It says, SA Health data shows ramping has nearly doubled since they were elected, meaning Labor, since they were elected, putting South Australia at risk. Data shows a 98% increase in ramping compared to the former Liberal government's last 4 months in office. Well, there's a bit of union hypocrisy to be reported here, firstly. Do you remember when they turned every single ambulance here in South Australia into a mobile billboard, campaigning for Labor on the basis that the ramping would stop if we all voted Labor? Has anyone gone to the ambulance union to ask them if they are going to be similarly vocal about the Labor Party, the Labor Party failure, and the broken promise? It just didn't deliver, ladies and gentlemen. The Libs have got a point about Labor's broken promise. But if they were in office today, you'd have to ask the question, if I was sort of at one of those sort of doorstop things, I would say, well, apart from the kind of gotcha moment that they are playing on the Labor Party, I would say, well, let's say you're in office today, what would you do to fix the problem? It'd be interesting to give them an opportunity to say. But I've got an idea. Why don't the Liberals be the first political party to offer us a money-back guarantee? A money-back guarantee. Have integrity. It means that if during an election campaign you promise something, anything, you will deliver it, or you will quit and go back to the people and face another election. Now that, I think, would make people sit up and take notice. It would make people more likely that they would trust a political promise and a party to keep that political promise. You could go to the next election, and I'm talking to the Liberal Party here, you could go to the next election saying that you would pass a law, you'd introduce legislation. That way you would be able to see, of course, we, in the court of public opinion, who voted for it and who didn't vote for it. But you would introduce legislation that would demand truth in political advertising. Wouldn't that be a fantastic vote-winning move? Truth in political advertising, just like we have to have truth in advertising generally across the board. Why should political advertising be allowed to have less integrity, honesty, accountability? Wouldn't it be interesting to see who voted for it? I'd vote for it, and I'm pretty sure you would. We can't, with the thought in mind that the federal Labor government is now going back on its promise not to touch superannuation. It is now saying, well, we won't make any big changes. That's still a broken promise. Fixing the ramping, that's a broken promise. I think we could do a lot to clear the air and make sure that our legislators, our politicians behaved well. First of all, they wouldn't promise things they knew in their hearts they couldn't or wouldn't deliver. So much to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. See you tomorrow. Pete and I will be back. I'm Jeremy Cordo. The Court of Public Opinion wishes you well. Believe in yourself, and thank you for viewing.